Somewhere inside you, a number is being held. You have been sitting in this room so long you started calling the sitting a life. Everyone in here is waiting for the same thing, an explanation. Why the marriage collapsed. Why the body turned against you at 41. Why the promotion went to someone with half your competence and none of your patience. Why the person you loved went quiet and never told you the reason. So you built one yourself out of guesses and 3 a.m. replays. You keep the guesses in a folder in your chest. You call the folder Figuring Things Out. You believe that once you understand, once someone calls your name and explains the diagnosis of your own existence, you'll finally be free to stand up and start living. Look at the chairs. They're bolted to the floor. You check your phone the way a devout man checks the sky for a sign. You read a horoscope on a day you'd deny reading horoscopes. You tell a friend everything happens for a reason with a straight face, as if you'd ever once seen the reason arrive, itemized on a piece of paper, signed by whoever's in charge. Nobody is in charge. That's the part you haven't let yourself hear yet. You're the woman who's delayed the business 6 years running, waiting to feel ready, as if readiness were a stamp handed out by an office you've simply failed to locate. You're the man rereading old texts at midnight, hunting the one line that will finally make the ending make sense, as if meaning were hiding in the punctuation. You're the retiree who spent 40 years telling yourself, I'll really live once I stop working, and now you're stopped, and the living hasn't started on its own. And nobody warned you that freedom doesn't arrive preloaded with a reason to use it. Here's what nobody in this room says out loud. The door at the back, the one marked staff only, the one you assume leads to someone who knows, it has never opened. Not for the man who's been here 11 years, not for the woman crying quietly in the corner, holding a number so faded she can't read it anymore. Not for the child in the third row who keeps asking why and keeps getting handed a softer lie instead of an answer, because the adults in the room don't have one either. You keep sitting because sitting feels like progress toward an answer. It isn't. It's paralysis, wearing the costume of patience. You tell yourself, once I know why he left, I'll heal. Once I know why she died at 36 and the cruel man down the street lives to 90, I'll make peace. Once I know my purpose, I'll start. So you wait. You wait through your 20s, mistaking them for a rehearsal. You wait through the good years, certain the real ones are still ahead. You wait through a funeral, standing at the grave, expecting the priest's words to land somewhere and mean something, and feeling instead a silence so total it embarrasses you. So you fill it with the only sentence available. Everything happens for a reason. Does it? Has anyone ever shown you the reason, held it up to the light? Or have you simply agreed, along with everyone else in this room, not to mention that the door has never once opened? Because if one person said it out loud, the whole waiting room would have to stand up at once, and no one has rehearsed what happens after that. So you sit. The clock on the wall has no hands. Somewhere in the building, a name is being called that isn't yours. You lean forward anyway. You always lean forward anyway, as if leaning were the same thing as being chosen next. If these words carved an echo within your void, do not turn back. The descent has just begun. Click below, subscribe, and claim your reality. A tubercular young man from a poor neighborhood in Algiers used to walk down to the sea and just look at it. No church, no father with answers. His own father died before he could remember his face, killed in a war fought over reasons the boy never got to ask about. Just heat, poverty, and a sea that gave nothing back except its glare. His name was Albert Camus, and what he noticed on that shore is the only diagnosis this wound has ever had. He called it The absurd. Not absurd like a joke, absurd like a marriage that can't be annulled. You have a hunger for meaning wired into you so deep you can't switch it off. You want reasons, patterns, a story where the suffering adds up to something. And the universe, the actual universe, gives you weather. It gives you cell division. It gives you a bus that arrives or doesn't. It has never once, not for a single person in human history, sent a signed explanation. The absurd isn't the silence of the universe alone, and it isn't your longing alone either. It's the collision, your question, slamming full speed into a wall that was never built to answer it, and neither side backing down. Watch what people do with that collision, because almost no one survives it standing still. A woman prays every night for a sign about whether to leave her husband, and when the streetlight flickers as she says his name, she takes it as an answer, because a flickering bulb is easier to live with than an open question. A man loses his job and immediately builds a story. The universe is redirecting me towards something better, because the alternative, that it simply happened, with no redirection intended by anyone, is unbearable to hold for even one afternoon. Camus had a name for this move. He called it philosophical suicide, not killing the body, killing the question. You feel the void opening under your feet, and instead of standing in it, you leap into religion promising a plan, into astrology promising alignment, into a political cause, a guru, a rigid ideology that hands you a finished answer so total you never have to sit again in that waiting room and admit nobody's coming. Watch how fiercely people defend these leaps once they've made them, not because the belief was tested, but because letting it go means going back to the room. Watch it in gentler clothing, too. A woman posts a vision board every January, certain that naming her desires precisely enough will bend circumstance toward her. And when it doesn't, she assumes she simply didn't believe hard enough. Never that belief was never the mechanism to begin with. That's a leap dressed as self-improvement. It still ends in the same place, a manufactured certainty standing in for an answer nobody actually has. He respected the terror behind the leap. He just refused to call it honest. Here's the part that should unsettle you. Camus said the other leap, actual suicide, walking out of the room by ending the sitting altogether, is also a surrender. It agrees with despair that life needs a reason to be worth living, and then it obeys that verdict. The leap into false faith and the leap off the ledge are cousins. Both flinch, both refuse to hold the tension a second longer. He opened his most famous essay by saying there is really only one serious question in all of philosophy: whether life is worth living at all, given that it comes with no explanation attached. Every other question, career, politics, what to have for dinner, is downstream of that one. Almost nobody lets themselves actually reach it, because reaching it means standing exactly where you're standing right now, in this room, with both leaps closed off. What's left, if you can't explain the silence away, and you won't end the questioning by ending yourself? You hold it, both hands, wide awake. That's the whole diagnosis, and it's most of what he ever asked of anyone. Stay in the room, keep your eyes open, and stop waiting for the door. He put this into a story about a man on trial after his mother's funeral, not for a crime yet committed, but for not crying on cue, for refusing to perform a grief he didn't feel on command. The court despised his honesty more than it would have forgiven a lie. They needed his tears to mean something, and when he wouldn't supply it, they decided he must be a monster. That's the cost of this diagnosis, paid over and over by anyone who tries it. People will call your clear sight coldness. It isn't. It's the only kind of warmth that hasn't lied to you first, and it's still coming for you, whether you've made room for it yet or not. Here's the assumption you walked in with, the one you didn't even know you were carrying, that if you wait long enough, or search hard enough, or suffer with enough patience, the door eventually opens. That meaning is like a train. Late, maybe. Delayed by weather, by grief, by bad luck. But coming. It isn't delayed. There is no train. Go back to the room. Go up to the door marked staff only. The one you've been watching your entire life out of the corner of your eye, promising yourself that the moment you understand enough, deserve enough, suffer enough, it will open. Put your hand on it now. Push. It's painted on the wall. It was never a door. It's a mural someone put there, so the waiting would feel like it was leading somewhere. The same way a parent tells a child their grandmother went to a better place, not because they know this, but because the alternative sentence, she is simply gone, and there is no place, has nowhere soft to land in a 5-year-old's mouth. We hand each other murals instead of doors, generation after generation, and call it comfort. Look at how many murals you've been handed and never once asked to see behind. Good things come to those who wait. What's meant for you won't miss you. The universe has a plan. Each one is a brushstroke on the same wall, and each one is repeated so often, by so many well-meaning people, that the paint starts to look structural. It isn't. Knock on it. It's hollow every time. Sit with that a moment, because the cruelty runs deeper than no one is coming. The chairs were never bolted down to keep you patient while help arrived. They're bolted down because there's nothing else in the building. The waiting room isn't a stop on the way to an answer. The waiting room is the whole structure. There is no other wing, no back office, no staff. This is the part Camus wouldn't soften, the part he wrote into a novel about a plague ripping through a sealed city. The disease didn't care who deserved to live. It took the pious and the cruel with the same indifference it took the children. No sermon changed the death count. No repentance bought an exemption. A priest stood over the body of a child who suffered for hours and offered the town a reason for it. And the reason didn't stop a single symptom, didn't ease a single hour of that suffering. Didn't even survive the walk home intact for the men who'd heard it preached. That's not a metaphor for hardship. That's a description of how it actually works, everywhere, all the time, including in your own life, right now, in the room you're sitting in. You will very likely die without ever being told why the person you loved most left, why your body failed when it did, why the good ones go early and the cruel ones get decades. That knowledge isn't coming later. It was never scheduled. It was never even printed. Now here's the part that should feel like air after held breath. Not a lecture, not a preview of what's coming next. A release, right here, right now, in your chest. The moment you stop believing the door will open, you stop being a person who waits. You were never actually trapped by the room. You were trapped by the appointment you'd made with an explanation that was never going to show up. Cancel the appointment, and the walls haven't moved an inch, but you're standing. You feel your own weight again, your feet flat on the floor, for what might be the first time in years, and it is almost embarrassing how simple the relief is once you stop refusing it. That's revolt, not an argument you win, not a mood, not a single dramatic decision made once and finished. A muscle you use over and over every time the old appointment tries to reschedule itself back onto your calendar. The second you stop waiting for the silence to become an answer, the silence stops being a cage and starts being simply weather. Something you walk through, not something that owes you shelter, not something that has to apologize before you're allowed to move again. You don't need the door to open. You never did. You need to stand up while it's still shut, and that standing is the only thing in this entire building that was ever actually yours to do. 4 weapons. Not a philosophy you admire from a chair. Not a comfort to file next to the murals you just walked away from. Each one costs you something the moment you pick it up, which is exactly how you'll know it's real, and not one more painted door. Weapon 1. The cancelled appointment. Picture the exact moment. You're refreshing an inbox for a reply that will finally explain why he left. And somewhere behind your ribs, you already know it isn't coming today, this week, maybe ever. Do this instead. Say it out loud, alone, in a room with no one to perform bravery for. I am cancelling this appointment. Not, I'm healed. Not, I understand now. Just, I will no longer schedule my life around an explanation arriving. This is uncomfortable, because it feels like giving up. It's the opposite. Giving up is staying seated, phone in hand, forever. This is standing while the question is still open, maybe forever open, and choosing to move anyway. The cost, you lose the comfort of, someday I'll understand, a comfort you've been living on like credit you never earned. You go into debt-free honesty instead, and it's colder in the first week, and realer in every week after. The kind of cold that wakes you up instead of the kind that just makes you shiver. Weapon 2, the refused leap. Every comforting belief you hold it up to the light and ask one brutal question. Did I arrive at this, or did I leap into it to stop looking at the silence? Everything happens for a reason. Leap. She's in a better place, watching over me. It was meant to be. Leap. Not because these are stupid, because they're escape hatches dressed as insight, installed the instant the void got too loud to sit through. The tool. For 1 week, every time you feel the urge to explain away a painful, senseless event, stop the sentence in your mouth before it finishes. Let the event stay unexplained, hanging there, ugly and unresolved. It will itch like a wound that's healing wrong, until it heals right. Let it itch. Don't reach for the vocabulary that would soothe it. No silver lining, no blessing in disguise. The itch is you, finally awake, refusing the exit that was never real to begin with. Weapon 3, the full-eyed stare. Most people manage mortality the way a man manages a debt collector, by never picking up the phone. You scroll instead of sitting with it. You joke instead of naming it. You keep impossibly busy so the question never gets a quiet room to ask itself in. Camus asked for the opposite, lucidity. Stare at the fact of your own death, daily, on purpose, without flinching and without spiraling into despair. Both are ways of looking away, just in opposite directions. A man who does this for 30 seconds each morning, naming it plainly, I will die, and I do not know when, and no one will explain why then, and not sooner. Stops postponing his one actual life for a version of it that only starts once things make sense. The cost is real. You lose the numbing fog that made the days feel infinite and interchangeable. What replaces it is attention. Ordinary Tuesday attention, sharpened until it almost hurts. Until the coffee tastes like something instead of nothing. Until the voice of the person across the table stops being background noise you'll get to later. Weapon 4. The descent. Here's the image Camus left behind, the one that outlived him. A man condemned to push a boulder up a mountain forever, watching it roll back down every single time, for eternity. With no finish line and no reward waiting at the top. Everyone quotes the pushing. Almost no one talks about the walk back down, the part where the man, boulder free for a moment, has to descend the mountain knowing exactly what's coming next and choose how to make that walk. Camus insisted this man could be happy in that descent, not despite the pointlessness of the task, but because he owns it completely. Nothing above him decides how he walks, how he holds his shoulders, whether he notices the view on the way down. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Pick your own repetitive, unrewarded return. The same dishes, the same commute. The same difficult parent you call every Sunday for no applause, and walk back down to it on purpose, chin level, not dragging your feet like a sentence being served. That shift from sentence to choice costs you the excuse that your life is happening to you, an excuse you may have been leaning on for years without noticing its weight. It was always yours to walk, every single unglamorous descent of it, boulder or no boulder waiting at the bottom. A woman sits in an actual waiting room now, fluorescent light, a magazine from 11 months ago, a number in her hand that a stranger printed for her 20 minutes earlier. She's waiting on a test result that will tell her whether the pain in her side is nothing or is the beginning of everything changing. Her phone buzzes in her lap. A rejection email from the job she'd built a whole future around, the one that was supposed to finally make the last 6 years make sense. The one she'd told herself would be the reason for all of it. Old her would have sat very still and started building the story. Reasons why. Signs she missed. A universe with a plan she just couldn't see yet. If she waited, if she was patient enough, deserving enough, quiet enough. Old her would have reread the rejection email 4 times, looking for a hidden door in the wording, the way she once reread a folder of guesses in her own chest. Certain the right sentence would finally arrive and settle everything. She looks at the door marked staff only. She knows fully now what's actually behind it. Maybe good news today. Maybe not. Either way, no explanation coming for any of it. Not for the timing, not for why her, not for why now instead of some kinder year. No signature waiting at the bottom of any of this, no matter how long she keeps her eyes on that door. She stands up anyway, not because she's been called. Her number is still 3 away, because she's done waiting to be called before she starts living the only life she actually has. In the only body she actually has, today, in this ugly fluorescent light, instead of some future room where everything will have been explained. She hands the receptionist a polite nod and walks out into weather that doesn't know her name. Rain, indifferent, exactly as indifferent as the day she was born into it, without being asked. She doesn't need it to mean something. She turns her face up into it anyway, the way a man once stood on a shore in Algiers and let the glare off the sea hit him without demanding it explain itself first. The rain doesn't part for her. It doesn't slow down out of respect for what she's carrying. It just falls, the same on her shoulders as on the pavement, as on the roof of the building she just walked out of, entirely unconcerned with the test result, still sitting unopened in some lab down the hall. And for the first time in longer than she can name, that lack of concern doesn't feel like abandonment. It feels like room to move. She isn't cured. Nothing got solved. The chair is still bolted down behind her. Someone else is sitting in it right now, leaning forward, waiting for a door that was painted shut before either of them ever arrived, telling themselves the wait is almost over. But she's walking, in the rain, past the parked cars, past a bus she doesn't check the schedule for, because she isn't waiting on that either anymore. That's the whole verdict, and it was always this simple and never once easy. Stop waiting for the door, and the room stops being a room. It becomes simply the outside, and the outside was always where you actually lived, waiting rooms and all, doors painted shut and all, the entire time you thought you were waiting to begin. Somewhere behind her, a door marked staff only stays exactly where it's always been. Closed, painted, harmless now that she's stopped needing it to be anything else. She doesn't look back at it. She doesn't need to. It was never the thing keeping her seated. She was. The sun doesn't explain itself. Stand in it anyway. What door have you been sitting in front of? And what would it cost you to stand up before it opens?